Hey, what's going on, everybody on YouTube? How's everybody doing? I'm doing just fine. I'm doing awesome, actually. So today, welcome back to another building tips and tricks video where I'm going to be talking about how to add depth into your builds. Now, what is depth? What is it? Why do builders talk about it? Why is it used in builds? Why is it kind of important? Well, the main purpose of depth is to give the illusion that there is shadows, to create the more detail in the build using different layers, and I'll show you that in a minute. But right here we have a flat wall. There's not a lot of interest going on. There's only interest in the texture, and I did do a video on texture, and if you want to check that out, there will be an eye in the top right corner. And texture is different. Now you can use texture and depth together to create really cool detailed builds, but for this purpose here, texture is only used, and this is fine, but you can get a lot more out of just setting this back one block. You can see that it kind of creates a little bit of a shadow along the edges. It just adds a little bit more to what would normally just be a flat wall. The pillars are bumped out a little bit more, and this is just a basic concept of what depth in builds actually is. It's not something that's required, really, but it definitely helps builds a ton, and it makes them look much more detailed, I would say, and much more to look at, just adding shadows and all that different kinds of things. So now that we kind of know what the basics are with depth in general, let's take it one step further here. Let's take a look at that, same wall that we had before, and let's expand upon that. Let's add more depth. Let's add more details. Again, we're using a little bit of texturing here, but what is really helping this is the depth itself. So right here we have 3 layers of depth. We have the cobblestone, andesite, and stone. Then stone brick, cracked stone brick, and polished andesite with stairs and slabs to create this nice looking window. And then finally, we have the pillars themselves. Now, I'm not saying that your build exactly has to be like this every time. This is just an example. This is just showing you how many layers of depth you can have. So we have the cobblestone and andesite and whatever in the back there to create the main window. And then we sort of have like the arch around the window. And then we have the pillars, the supporting feature of the build, the main pillars of the build. So this is just a really nice example and simple example of just showing you like the different layers, and if you add more layers to depth, the more detail you kind of get out of that. And I hope that makes sense. Here is a perfect example of depth, just drawing you into a center focal point, like an entrance, for instance. You have many arches, you have your supporting pillars, keeping on that same theme, just keeping it simple, but you have these supporting pillars that are holding up the build, the main structure, the wood itself, and then we go in one more layer, we have our stone brick, and then we have even more depth. We have actually 4 layers of depth here, and the little details, and we'll just kind of get out of spectator mode here just to show you that these little details like trap doors, these walls right here, and the fences being right here also add a little bit of depth as well. Fences being inset by a little bit add a little bit of depth. So depth doesn't have to be a full block back. It can be like, trap doors. It can be, windows and all that different things. It can be doors, whatever. It just has to give that illusion that it's set back a little bit. And that really helps a build just have that more detail. And again, this is a bit of an extreme sort of version because there's a little bit of balance when it comes to using depth. You don't want to have too much because then you're not going to have enough interior room. The problem with depth is the more you go in, the less interior room you're going to have, but the exterior is going to look good. So if you're just going for an exterior style of build, it will probably look the best. And this is one of the main reasons why builders want vertical slabs, because that will be a very easy way of creating depth in a in creating a small space. Really is just the main reason why vertical slabs would be just so perfect because you can create depth on a half slab basis, which would be absolutely phenomenal. It'd be great. But unfortunately, we don't have that. So we have to kind of work with block by block or with trap doors or even over here by walls. Now, this isn't a great example. Now, okay, well, it's a good example of how walls could work, but walls aren't great in themselves. And I'll show you why. Once you go to add an interior to this build or a second wall even, what happens is that illusion is quickly ruined by this little wall right here. You can see if we try to add any like furniture on the inside or any sort of blocks that connect to the walls, we already start to get some problems here, and that doesn't look too great. Now, it is a little bit of an indent, and some of you might not mind that, but for a little bit of detail, it doesn't really look too great. It kind of ruins the effect that we're going for, where this wall is just sort of flat. Now, if you're not adding interior to this build, it's absolutely fine. That would work really, really well. The walls, they add just that little bit of depth that we're kind of hoping for with vertical slabs, so it kind of works. But walls, they're not quite as much depth as I would personally like. But if they could be all the way back here, that would be perfect. That would be vertical slabs in a nutshell. Now, walls are great. They do work and they do function. They add a little hint of depth, which is fine. And as you can see up here, we have even more depth going on up here. So we have this, wool in the background here, and then we just have our wooden framework. This is a pretty simple form of depth, and also we're using texturing as well in here. So we're combining both to create a little bit of detail. So both of these together, depth and texture, work really well hand in hand. Now we're going to move on to a bigger example of depth, and you might know this build. So yes, this is the Afterlife Town Hall. If you didn't know, this is probably my best example that I can give you on a bigger scale of how depth can be really, really great. Now, I just want to mention that depth is more important the bigger you go with builds. It can really help builds out a lot. It's not saying that it's necessary, but with big builds, it really does add a lot of detail on a bigger scale. Whereas like smaller builds, if you're building a small starter house, it doesn't really matter that much. Texture matters a little bit more. But with a bigger build like this is where it comes into play. So I'll just show you a few examples of depth. Don't mind the Christmas decorations on here. This is from a little bit ago. This is an old design. But yeah, this is the town hall. And as you can see, there are a lot of layers of depth to this. And this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 layers of depth in the walls. In the walls themselves, okay? So, in the walls, in the pillars, it's a little bit different. You can see it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So, the way I think about this is, where do I want focal points? Where do I want to see things? Where I want to draw the person's eye? Obviously, this window is a big, kind of attraction to the town hall. So, the giant A in the town hall. So, having the layers go back and kind of center around this works really, really well. You could also say, I'm trying to also center it around this right here, these little kind of lights as well. For the pillars, it's these. So I'm trying to center it around this. I'm trying to arch it and draw your eye to these spots. And I would say that works really effectively. Now, you don't always have to do that with depth. Depth can be just to add that little bit of detail. Like over here, there's a lot going on. It's just a lot of different layers here. So this kind of naturally comes out like this. So what happens is you end up with something 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 layers of depth, which is this little focal point right here, this little focal point. And again, you're not just trying to go for those focal points, you're also just trying to add detail. You're just trying to add that little bit more into your build. And the more layers you have, the better you're going to be, especially with these bigger builds. But yeah, this is just a little example for you guys to just show you, how depth can be so effective. I wish I could show you some my other builds, and just show you some examples of depth there. But I think the Town Hall is probably my best example I have right now. So we'll just keep it at that. This kind of just, simplifies everything. This kind of just goes over everything. So hopefully that kind of gives you a little bit of insight on how to add depth into your builds. I know hopefully it's a, not that confusing. Let me know down in the comments below. And if you want me to do more like building tips, just like suggestions like this, I know these are very talkative videos, but I think they can be very kind of inspirational and also give you a little insight on how I like to build and just like little things that I kind of look for when I'm building these, massive buildings or small buildings, or just my steps I take into building. So again, if you want to, find that texturing video or how to texture your builds, I'll leave a little eye up in the top right corner of the video, and maybe a link down in the description as well. Somewhere down there. You can find it. But yeah, that's going to do it. As always, don't forget to be awesome, and I'll see you guys next time.